I'm Amelia, 37 years old, and I was standing in the middle of my company's biggest presentation when my phone buzzed with a text that destroyed my entire world. The message was from our family group chat, signed by my mother, father, two sisters, and brother. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." No explanation. No warning. Just complete abandonment. My hands started shaking so badly I dropped my phone, and 20 colleagues stared as I struggled to breathe. Just last Sunday, we'd had our usual family dinner, laughing and planning the holidays together. Before we dive into how my own family orchestrated the cruelest betrayal imaginable, I want to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt the sting of family rejection or wondered how people you love could turn against you, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will show you that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find your true worth. Trust me, what happened next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there all along, but when you've spent your entire life being the dependable daughter, the reliable sister, the one everyone counts on, you don't expect your family to be plotting your destruction behind your back. For 15 years, I never missed a single Sunday dinner at my parents' house in suburban Denver. Every week without fail, I'd drive the 45 minutes from my downtown apartment, bringing dessert from that expensive bakery Mom loved, sitting in the same chair at the same table, listening to the same stories, and thinking this was what love looked like. I was the successful one in the family, working as a marketing director at a tech company, single by choice, pouring all my energy into my career and my family. When my sister Bethany wanted her dream wedding but couldn't afford it, I wrote a check for $20,000 without hesitation. When my brother James needed $30,000 for a house down payment, I liquidated investments to help him. When Dad Robert needed heart surgery and Mom Grace was crying about the copays and deductibles their insurance wouldn't cover, I handled it all, nearly $50,000 over 2 years. I drove them to every appointment, stayed overnight at the hospital, managed their medications, and never once asked for anything in return. That last Sunday dinner should have set off every alarm bell in my head. Bethany barely looked at me when I complimented her new haircut, just mumbled something and turned away. James left early, claiming their baby was fussy, but his wife Megan seemed confused when he rushed her out. Mom got weirdly defensive when I offered to help with dishes, actually snapping at me that she could handle her own kitchen. Dad spent the entire meal staring at his plate, only speaking when directly asked a question, and even then just giving one-word answers. But I brushed it all off, thinking everyone was just having a bad day, stress from the holidays approaching, normal family stuff. 3 days later, sitting in that conference room presenting our quarterly marketing strategy to the board of directors, my phone lit up with the message that changed everything. I tried calling Mom immediately after the meeting, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted each family member individually, watching those crushing read receipts pop up one by one with no responses. By evening, I was desperate enough to drive to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind racing through every recent interaction trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Their cars were all in the driveway, even James's SUV and Bethany's sedan. Through the dining room window, I could see them all sitting around the table, the same table where I'd sat just 3 days ago, but now my chair was gone. Not pushed in, not moved aside, but completely removed from the room like I'd never existed. Mom was laughing at something James said, Dad was pouring wine, Bethany was serving the pot roast I could smell from the porch, and they were having Sunday dinner on a Wednesday night without me. I stood on that porch I'd helped Dad repair last summer, rang the doorbell I'd installed for Mom's birthday, and watched through the window as they all looked toward the door, saw it was me, and went back to eating like I was nothing more than a door-to-door salesperson they could ignore. The next 3 weeks were a blur of confusion and desperation as I tried to understand why my entire family had suddenly decided I was toxic enough to completely erase from their lives. I reached out to extended family, starting with my cousin Diane, who'd always been like a sister to me, but when she answered my call, her voice was strange, distant. like she was talking to a telemarketer instead of the cousin who'd been her maid of honor just 2 years ago. "I can't get involved in this, Amelia," she said, and when I pressed her for answers, she just kept repeating that phrase like a rehearsed script before hanging up on me. I spent hours analyzing every recent family interaction like a detective solving a crime. There was my promotion announcement at my birthday dinner 2 months ago, when I'd excitedly told everyone about becoming senior vice president, the youngest in company history, with a salary that would finally let me pay off my student loans and still help the family. Instead of congratulations, I'd gotten tight smiles and subject changes. At Christmas, when I'd given everyone generous gifts including the new laptop mom needed and the tools Dad had been eyeing, the atmosphere had turned awkward, with Bethany making snide comments about showing off that I'd laughed off as holiday stress. Then there was Thanksgiving when I'd offered to host next year at my new apartment with its spacious dining room and gourmet kitchen, thinking it would give Mom a break from cooking for once. The immediate shutdown should have been my first real warning. "That's not how we do things," Mom had said coldly, while Bethany added something about tradition and keeping things normal, whatever that meant. James had just shaken his head like I'd suggested something offensive, and Dad hadn't even looked up from his football game. The breakthrough came when I ran into Diane at the grocery store, and she tried to duck down another aisle to avoid me. I cornered her by the frozen vegetables, and something about my desperation must have gotten through, because she finally cracked. "There's a WhatsApp group," she whispered, looking around like we were discussing state secrets. "The whole family's in it except you. They call it Family Real Talk, and they've been planning this for months, Amelia. They have meetings about you, actual meetings with agendas and everything." My hands went numb as she pulled out her phone, glancing around nervously before showing me screenshots she'd saved. There it was in black and white, my family discussing the Amelia problem like I was some kind of infection that needed to be cut out. Mom writing paragraphs about how I made everyone feel inferior, Dad agreeing that my success was disruptive to family harmony, James complaining that I thought I was better than them, and Bethany, my baby sister who I'd protected from bullies and taught to drive and held through every heartbreak, calling me controlling and manipulative, saying I used money to make them feel small. The real shock came when I visited Uncle Frank, Dad's brother who'd always been the black sheep for moving to California and marrying outside their approved social circle. After a few beers, he let slip about the family financial discussions I'd been deliberately excluded from over the past year. "They didn't want you to know about Dorothy," he said, then immediately tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Dorothy was my grandmother, my dad's mother who lived in Florida, who I video called every week and visited every few months despite the distance and expense. "What about Grandma Dorothy?" I demanded, and the look on his face told me everything. Something had happened to my grandmother, and my family had made sure I wouldn't know about it. The conspiracy wasn't just about cutting me out of their lives. They'd been setting something up for months, maybe longer, and I was starting to understand that this wasn't about hurt feelings or family dynamics. This was about something much bigger, and the first major betrayal was just beginning to surface. 3 weeks into the deafening silence from my family, I was barely functioning, going through the motions at work while spending every evening searching for answers, when an unknown number called my cell. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up, and the formal voice on the other end introduced himself as Bradley Hutchinson, senior partner at Hutchinson, Myers, and Associates in Miami. "I'm calling regarding the estate of Dorothy Marie Anderson," he said, and my legs gave out as I sank onto my couch. My grandmother had passed away 2 months ago, and no one had told me. 2 months of my family pretending everything was normal, 2 months of Sunday dinners where they knew she was gone and I didn't, 2 months of me leaving cheerful voicemails on her phone that would never be answered. The lawyer continued talking about funeral arrangements that had already happened, a service I'd missed, a burial I couldn't attend, final moments I'd been deliberately denied, and I felt something inside me break and reshape into a harder, sharper version of myself. But the revelations were just beginning. "Your grandmother left very specific instructions in her will," Mr. Hutchinson explained, his voice careful and professional. She's left you the bulk of her estate, including liquid assets of approximately $2 million, her oceanfront property in Key West valued at $3 million, and her investment portfolio. The numbers didn't even register at first. All I could think about was Grandma Dorothy, alone in her final days while I was blissfully ignorant, probably talking about visiting her at some family dinner while they all knew she was already gone. Then Mr. Hutchinson dropped the next bomb. Your family has contested the will, claiming undue influence and mental incapacity. They filed the challenge 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, I'd been at Sunday dinner, helping Mom plan Dad's birthday party, completely unaware they were simultaneously trying to steal my inheritance. The lawyer sent me documentation that laid out their case, and reading their sworn statements was like being stabbed by people wearing the faces of my loved ones. My mother Grace had testified that I'd been manipulating Dorothy for years, isolating her from the real family, turning her against her own son and grandchildren with lies and emotional blackmail. She claimed I'd forced my grandmother to video call me, that I'd threatened to stop visiting if she didn't give me money, that I'd stolen jewelry and family heirlooms during my trips. Every word was a calculated lie, and she'd sworn to it under oath, my own mother painting me as a predator who'd preyed on a helpless old woman. My father Robert's affidavit was even worse. He'd signed a statement claiming I was mentally unstable, prone to delusions of grandeur and narcissistic episodes, suggesting I'd coerced my grandmother during periods of her own mental decline. He provided examples of my instability that were really just twisted versions of normal events, like the time I'd cried at Grandma's birthday because I was happy to see her after a difficult work period, which he'd reimagined as a manipulative emotional outburst designed to gain sympathy and money. The real orchestrator became clear when I read Bethany's deposition and recognized the language as coming from her husband Drake, a real estate attorney who'd always resented that I made more money than him. His fingerprints were all over the legal strategy, from the specific claims to the timing of the filing. They'd needed me gone not just from the family, but completely discredited to strengthen their case, and suddenly the family exile made perfect sense. It was never about hurt feelings or family dynamics. It was about $2 million and a piece of paradise in Key West. My hands shook as I read the letter Grandma Dorothy had left with her lawyer, anticipating this exact situation. My dearest Amelia, it began, if you're reading this, then they've shown their true colors at last. You were the only one who visited me without asking for money, the only one who called just to talk, not to complain or make requests. Your brother came twice in 5 years, both times with his hand out. Your sisters couldn't be bothered unless they needed something. Your parents treated me like an ATM, not a mother. But you, sweet girl, you treated me like a grandmother worth knowing. She went on to detail every visit, every call, every birthday card I'd sent, contrasting it with the neglect from the rest of the family. She'd kept records, dates, times, even recordings of some calls where my siblings had only contacted her for money. She knew exactly what she was doing with her will and had prepared for their greed, but reading her words, seeing how much she'd noticed and appreciated what I'd thought were just basic acts of love, broke my heart all over again. If I thought being exiled from my family was the worst they could do, I severely underestimated the depths of their greed and cruelty. Within days of learning about the inheritance, their campaign against me escalated from silent treatment to full-scale warfare designed to destroy not just my family relationships, but my entire life. It started subtly with Bethany's social media posts about protecting yourself from toxic family members and when blood relatives become energy vampires, posts that our mutual friends and extended family saw and began asking me about. Then came the direct attacks on my professional life. My boss called me into his office on a Monday morning, looking uncomfortable as he explained that my brother James had contacted the company's HR department with concerns about my mental stability and fitness for my position. James had presented himself as a worried family member, claiming I'd been showing signs of paranoid delusion, aggression, and erratic behavior that made him fear for my colleagues' safety. He'd even provided a letter signed by both my parents supporting his concerns, suggesting the company should require me to undergo psychiatric evaluation before allowing me to continue in my role. The suspension was temporary and precautionary, just until they could investigate, but I could see the doubt in everyone's eyes as security escorted me from the building. 30 years old, stellar performance reviews, about to lead our biggest campaign launch, and suddenly I was the unstable employee who might snap at any moment. My team looked at me with fear instead of respect, and I heard later that James had also contacted several of our major clients with similar warnings, nearly costing the company millions in lost contracts. While I was fighting to save my career, my parents were busy poisoning every other relationship in my life. They told extended family that I'd been stealing from Grandma Dorothy for years, that she'd confided her fears to them but been too afraid of me to take action. Aunts and uncles who'd known me since birth suddenly wouldn't return my calls. Cousins blocked me on social media. The annual family reunion invitation was rescinded with a curt email stating, "Given recent revelations about your behavior, we think it best you don't attend." My neighbors received anonymous letters warning them about the dangerous individual living in apartment 1217, complete with claims that I'd threatened my family and had a history of violence. The building's management company called asking if I was having personal difficulties they should know about. Someone had been calling my landlord claiming to be a concerned relative, suggesting they might want to reconsider my lease renewal for the safety of other tenants. Then came the most personal betrayal yet. My best friend since college, Carla, who'd been my rock through every family drama, finally admitted she'd been reporting back to Bethany for over a year. "She said she was worried about you," Carla explained, not meeting my eyes. "She made it sound like they were trying to help you, and I thought if I told them what was going on in your life, they could find a way to reconnect." Every secret I'd shared, every moment of vulnerability, every confession of loneliness or struggle had been ammunition gathered for this eventual attack. The digital assault was next. My dating profiles across multiple apps were hacked, with messages sent to all my matches containing explicit photos that weren't me and aggressive, unhinged messages that ensured I'd be reported and banned. My LinkedIn was flooded with fake recommendations describing me as difficult to work with and mentally unstable, but hides it well. My email began receiving hundreds of newsletters and spam signups daily, making it almost impossible to find legitimate messages. Even my Netflix account was compromised, my viewing history replaced with disturbing content that someone screenshot and sent to my employer as evidence of my instability. The fifth major betrayal came when I discovered my mother had been systematically accessing my personal information through the joint bank account we'd maintained since college for emergency purposes. She'd downloaded years of statements, tracked every purchase, monitored every deposit, and used this information to build their case that I was financially irresponsible despite helping them repeatedly. She'd also used her access to change my security questions on various accounts, locking me out of my own financial life. One night, reviewing security footage after my car alarm went off for the third time that week, I spotted James's distinctive blue Honda Civic in the garage at 2 a.m, and then again the next night, and the night after that. He wasn't just checking on me. He was documenting my movements, photographing who visited, building some kind of dossier for their legal case. When someone tried to break into my apartment while I was at a lawyer's appointment, the building's cameras caught a figure in a hoodie who moved exactly like my brother, down to the slight limp from his old football injury. The threatening messages started coming from burner phones, always careful not to be explicitly criminal, but designed to terrorize. "Give up the inheritance, and this all goes away. Grandma would be ashamed of your greed. Family takes care of family, or family takes care of problems." When I reported them to the police, I was told without proof of who was sending them, there was little they could do. The officer suggested I might want to consider my family's offer, implying I was bringing this on myself by fighting for what Grandma Dorothy had explicitly left me. My lawyer, thankfully, was made of sterner stuff. "This is witness intimidation," she said firmly after reviewing everything. "They're trying to break you before the court hearing. Document everything, save every message, every voicemail, every social media post. They're showing the court exactly who they really are. But knowing that didn't make living through it any easier. I installed new locks, security cameras, and alarm system. I changed my phone number twice, only for the messages to find me again. I hired a private investigator who confirmed what I suspected, that my family had employed someone to surveil me, document my activities, and look for anything they could twist into evidence of instability or unfitness to inherit. The coordinated nature of the attacks was almost impressive in its scope. While Drake handled the legal strategies, Bethany managed the social media campaign. James led the professional sabotage. Mom accessed and leaked personal information, and Dad provided the respectable face to legitimize their claims. Even extended family members had roles, spreading gossip, validating lies, and ensuring I was isolated from any potential support system. They'd turned destroying me into a family project, and they pursued it with more dedication than they'd ever shown to actually being a family. Rock bottom has a way of clarifying your priorities, and sitting in my apartment with new deadbolts on the door, security cameras recording every angle, and a lawyer on speed dial, I realized I had two choices. Let them destroy me or fight back with everything I had. The old Amelia, the one who wrote checks without question and never missed Sunday dinner, would have crumbled, would have given them whatever they wanted just to make it stop. But that Amelia had died the moment I stood on my parents' porch, watching them erase me from their lives, and the woman who emerged from her ashes was done being anyone's victim. My first move was hiring Margaret Chin, a pit bull of an attorney who specialized in inheritance disputes and family fraud cases. She took one look at my documentation and actually smiled, the kind of smile a shark might give upon spotting a particularly juicy seal. "Your family made a crucial error," she explained. "They put everything in writing. Every lie, every threat, every coordinated attack leaves a paper trail, and they've essentially built our case for us." She immediately filed countersuits for defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with inheritance, turning their own tactics against them. Next came the systematic gathering of evidence, and Grandma Dorothy, bless her soul, had made it easy. She'd known exactly who her family really was and had prepared accordingly. The nursing home staff provided sworn statements about my regular visits versus the family's absence. Her doctors confirmed she'd been of completely sound mind when the will was updated. Bank records showed my consistent financial support to her over the years, while my family had only contacted her when they needed money. She'd even kept a detailed journal documenting every interaction, every visit, every phone call, creating an undeniable record of who had actually loved her versus who had seen her as a future payday. Margaret subpoenaed my family's financial records as part of discovery, and what we found explained their desperation. My parents were 6 months behind on their mortgage despite the help I'd given them, having spent the money on vacations and luxury items instead. James's construction business was failing, hemorrhaging money due to his poor management and multiple lawsuits from unsatisfied customers. Bethany and Drake were drowning in credit card debt, living a lifestyle far beyond their means, with Drake's gambling problem draining whatever Bethany earned. They hadn't just wanted Grandma's money, they'd been counting on it, making plans and promises based on an inheritance they'd assumed would be split evenly. While building our legal case, I also had to rebuild my life. The therapy group for family estrangement became my lifeline, filled with others who understood the unique pain of being betrayed by those who were supposed to love you unconditionally. There was Marcus, whose family had disowned him for marrying outside their race, and Jennifer, whose siblings had stolen her identity and ruined her credit out of spite. We formed our own chosen family, supporting each other through court dates and dark nights, proving that blood relation meant nothing compared to genuine care and respect. My return to work required careful orchestration. Margaret worked with my company's legal team to demonstrate that James's accusations were part of a coordinated harassment campaign. We provided evidence of my stellar performance history, testimonials from colleagues, and documentation of the family's financial motives. The investigation revealed that an employee in HR, Bethany's former college roommate, had been feeding them information and helping coordinate the attack from inside. She was terminated, and I returned to work with a promotion and a raise, the company eager to avoid a lawsuit for their role in the harassment. The preliminary hearing for the inheritance case became the first real victory. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, not only dismissed my family's claims of undue influence, but expressed concern about their coordinated campaign of harassment designed to intimidate a rightful beneficiary. He ordered them to cease all contact with me, my employer, and my associates, putting legal teeth behind the no-contact demand they'd started this whole nightmare with. Watching their lawyer's face as the judge dressed him down for bringing a frivolous and malicious case was the first moment of satisfaction I'd felt in months. But I wasn't done. The defamation lawsuit moved forward, and depositions became a beautiful kind of justice. Watching my mother squirm as Margaret questioned her about the lies she'd told, seeing my father struggle to explain the contradictions in his statements, observing James's panic as his harassment was laid out in legal terms, and especially watching Drake realize his law license was in jeopardy for his role in the conspiracy, gave me strength I hadn't known I possessed. They'd united to destroy me, but now they were fracturing, each trying to minimize their own culpability by throwing the others under the bus. The security footage of James stalking me, combined with the threatening messages traced back to phones purchased with his credit card, led to criminal charges. The burner phone records revealed a pattern of harassment that included not just threats to me, but attempts to intimidate my lawyer and the witnesses who'd supported my grandmother's mental capacity. The criminal case proceeded parallel to the civil suits, and suddenly my brother was looking at possible jail time for what he'd probably thought would be consequence-free bullying. My support network grew stronger as the truth became public. Former colleagues who'd initially distanced themselves reached out with apologies and support. Neighbors who'd received the warning letters expressed outrage at being manipulated. Even some extended family members began questioning the narrative they'd been fed, especially as documents filed in court revealed the extent of my financial support to the family over the years versus their complete neglect of Grandma Dorothy except when they needed money. The real triumph came when I moved forward with life instead of just fighting to get back what I'd lost. Using part of my salary increase, I started a foundation in Grandma Dorothy's name to help elderly people maintain independence and connections with loved ones who actually cared about them, not just their assets. I began dating again, cautiously but optimistically, meeting Thomas through the therapy group's support network, someone who understood complicated family dynamics and the importance of boundaries. I even started planning a move to Grandma's house in Key West once the legal matters were settled, envisioning a fresh start in the place she loved most. They say the truth will set you free, but first it will destroy everything built on lies, and watching my family's carefully constructed conspiracy collapse was like witnessing a building demolition in slow motion. Without me as their common enemy and scapegoat, without the inheritance they'd already mentally spent, and facing mounting legal bills they couldn't afford, they turned on each other with all the viciousness they'd previously reserved for me. The family WhatsApp group that had coordinated my destruction became a digital battlefield where years of resentment and suppressed grievances exploded into view. It started when Bethany discovered Drake hadn't been working late at the office all those nights, but had been meeting with Stephanie, her best friend from work, the one who'd been so supportive during their campaign against me. The private investigator I'd hired had noticed Drake's car at suspicious locations and, thinking it might be relevant to my case, had documented his activities. When this came out during depositions, Bethany's world imploded. The man who'd masterminded the legal strategy to steal my inheritance had been planning to leave her once they got the money, already apartment hunting with his mistress and making promises about their future together. The confrontation was explosive enough that their neighbors called the police, and Drake's arrest for violating the restraining order against me violated his bail conditions from the criminal harassment charges. Bethany, humiliated and enraged, began posting their private messages online, revealing not just his affair but his contempt for my parents, calling them useful idiots, and his plans to manipulate the inheritance division to get the majority for himself. She also revealed that Drake had been stealing from his law firm's client trust accounts to fund his gambling, information that ended his legal career and added criminal charges that would likely result in prison time. James's marriage crumbled next when his wife Megan learned the full extent of his involvement in the harassment campaign. She'd been told I was dangerous and unstable, justifying keeping their children away from me, but court documents revealed James had been using their savings to fund the surveillance and harassment, including hiring someone to break into my apartment. The criminal charges he faced meant he'd likely lose his contractor's license, and without that, his already failing business was doomed. Megan filed for divorce and full custody, stating in her filing that she could not trust someone capable of such calculated cruelty toward his own sister. My parents, faced with adult children who could no longer hide their true natures, watched their golden years turn to ash. Without me paying their bills and with legal fees mounting, the house went into foreclosure. Mom tried to get Bethany to help, but Bethany was dealing with her own financial crisis after Drake cleaned out their accounts before his arrest. James couldn't help even if he wanted to, with his assets frozen due to the criminal case. The retirement they'd planned with Grandma's money became bankruptcy proceedings and moving in with Mom's sister, who took them in only after extracting promises of repayment and making clear this was temporary charity, not family love. The extended family that had so readily believed their lies began to see the truth as court documents became public record. Cousin Diane called me crying, apologizing for believing them, explaining how they'd manipulated her with partial truths and outright lies. Uncle Frank sent a long email detailing how my father had tried to borrow money from him, claiming I'd stolen his retirement savings. Aunts who'd deleted me from social media reached out, ashamed of how easily they'd been turned against me without ever asking for my side of the story. The family reunions they'd banned me from became awkward affairs where my absence was a presence in itself. Family members who'd learned the truth would ask pointed questions about the inheritance case, about the criminal charges, about how they could have treated Dorothy's most devoted grandchild so cruelly. Others, still clinging to the lies because admitting they'd been wrong was too painful, created factions and divisions that turned every gathering into a minefield of accusations and resentments. My mother, in a desperate attempt to salvage something, sent a letter through her lawyer offering to drop their contest of the will if I would drop the defamation charges and help with their bills. The woman who'd sworn under oath that I was a manipulative predator now wanted me to save her from the consequences of her own actions. Margaret and I drafted a response that simply included copies of her sworn statements against me and a reminder that actions have consequences, something she'd apparently never learned in her 63 years of life. The final blow to their unity came when they had to face each other in family court. The judge ordered them to appear together for a settlement conference in the inheritance case, and the barely contained hostility was palpable. Bethany accused James of being Drake's puppet. James blamed Bethany for Drake's legal strategy backfiring. Both turned on their parents for raising me to be too successful and making the rest of them look bad. My parents blamed each other for not handling me better, whatever that meant. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to be anywhere else as they aired 20 years of dirty laundry in front of a judge who'd already made clear he found their behavior reprehensible. By the time the criminal trial for James began, they weren't even speaking to each other. Bethany testified against him to get a better deal for Drake. My parents threw him under the bus to protect themselves from potential charges. James's lawyer tried to argue his actions were influenced by his family, essentially admitting guilt while trying to minimize consequences. The family that had united to destroy me had destroyed themselves, and I wasn't even in the courtroom to watch it happen, too busy living my life to care about their continued downfall. The gossip mill in their community was brutal. The family that had presented themselves as pillars of the community, victims of an ungrateful daughter and sister, were revealed as conspirators who'd tried to steal from their own mother's chosen beneficiary. Church friends distanced themselves. Social invitations dried up. The country club membership they'd maintained with money I'd given them was revoked after Drake's financial crimes became public. They'd isolated me, but in doing so, they'd ultimately isolated themselves from anyone decent enough to be repelled by their actions. 1 year after receiving that devastating text message, I stood in my grandmother's Key West home, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson that reminded me why Dorothy had loved this place so much. The legal battles were over, every case decided in my favor, but more importantly, I had discovered a truth that no amount of inheritance could have bought. Losing my biological family had been the greatest gift they could have given me, though they'd never intended it as such. The windows were open, letting in the salt breeze that carried away the last lingering echoes of pain and betrayal. The inheritance case had concluded with complete vindication. The judge had not only upheld Grandma Dorothy's will, but had awarded me additional damages for the family's malicious and fraudulent attempts to deprive the rightful beneficiary. The defamation lawsuit resulted in a judgment that, while they'd never be able to fully pay, stood as a legal monument to their cruelty. James received 2 years probation and community service for the harassment charges, a criminal record that would follow him forever. Drake was serving 3 to 5 years for embezzlement and fraud, his legal career destroyed along with his marriage. My parents declared bankruptcy, their retirement dreams reduced to dependence on reluctant relatives who'd learned exactly who they really were. But dwelling on their downfall wasn't how I chose to heal. Instead, I threw myself into building the life Grandma Dorothy had envisioned for me when she left me not just money but freedom. The Dorothy Anderson Foundation launched with a mission to combat elder isolation and financial exploitation, providing resources for seniors to maintain independence and connections with chosen family rather than suffering neglect from blood relatives. The first grant went to the nursing home where she'd spent her final years, funding programs that connected residents with volunteers who visited out of genuine care, not obligation or greed. Therapy had been transformative, not just the group sessions, but intensive individual work to unpack decades of family dynamics I'd thought were normal. I learned about enmeshment, about how my role as the responsible one had been assigned to me before I could even choose it, about how financial support without emotional reciprocity was a form of exploitation, not love. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my family's reaction to my success wasn't really about me at all, but about their own insecurities and limitations. Their inability to celebrate someone else's achievements because they saw life as a zero-sum game where my gain was automatically their loss. The chosen family I'd built proved infinitely more valuable than the one I'd lost. Marcus from the support group became like the brother James had never really been, someone who celebrated my victories and supported me through setbacks without keeping score. Jennifer and her wife Sarah included me in their holiday celebrations, creating new traditions that didn't carry the weight of old obligations. Thomas and I took things slowly, both of us carrying scars from family trauma, but finding in each other someone who understood that love meant respect, not control, support, not sabotage. Moving to Key West had been like stepping into a new life entirely. The house needed work, and I found healing in the renovation process, stripping away old wallpaper like old pain, replacing broken fixtures like broken relationships, creating something beautiful from something neglected. I kept Grandma's art studio exactly as she'd left it, spending hours there painting terrible seascapes that she would have lovingly critiqued, feeling her presence in the space she'd loved most. The neighbors, many of whom remembered her fondly, welcomed me with the kind of genuine warmth my biological family had never shown. My career flourished without the constant drain of family drama. The promotion I'd nearly lost became a launching pad for even greater success. I started consulting on the side, helping other companies develop ethical marketing strategies, and discovered a passion for mentoring young professionals who reminded me of myself before life got complicated. The money I used to spend supporting ungrateful relatives went toward my own dreams and causes I believed in, and there was something profoundly liberating about keeping the fruits of my own labor. 6 months after the settlement, my mother sent another letter, this time handwritten, pages of justifications and blame mixed with what she probably thought was an apology. She wrote about how hard it had been to watch me succeed, how my father had felt emasculated by my achievements, how my siblings had always felt overshadowed. She painted herself as a victim caught between her children, forced to choose sides, as if orchestrating a conspiracy to steal my inheritance had been somehow thrust upon her. I read it once, felt a momentary pang for the mother I'd wished she'd been, then filed it with the other legal documents, evidence of a relationship that had never really existed outside my own projections. The one-year anniversary of their betrayal arrived with a sense of profound gratitude. I hosted a dinner party in Grandma's house, filling it with the people who'd stood by me, supported me, and shown me what real family looked like. We toasted to Dorothy Anderson, whose wisdom in both life and death had freed me from a toxic cycle. We celebrated not just surviving but thriving, not just healing but growing. Thomas squeezed my hand as I told the story of standing on my parents' porch that night, watching them erase me, not knowing it would be the beginning of finding myself. As my chosen family laughed and shared stories around the table, I thought about my biological family, probably in their own separate corners, nursing grudges and failures. I felt no anger anymore, no desire for revenge or reconciliation. They'd given me an unexpected gift by showing me exactly who they were, freeing me from decades of one-sided devotion and manipulation disguised as love. The price of that freedom had been paid in pain, but the return on investment was a life filled with genuine connection, honest relationships, and the kind of peace that comes from accepting that some people's absence is more valuable than their presence could ever be. The waves crashed against the shore as our dinner party moved to the deck, and I stood where Grandma Dorothy must have stood countless times, looking out at endless possibilities. She'd known what she was doing, not just with the inheritance, but with the letter she'd left, preparing me for exactly this moment. Live your life for you, she'd written. Not for obligation, not for appearances, not for people who only value what you can do for them. Live it for joy, for growth, for the people who see your light and want to bask in it, not dim it. I raised my glass to the sunset, to grandmother's wisdom, to the family who'd freed me by failing me, and most of all, to the woman I'd become in the crucible of their cruelty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new connections with people who knew how to love without conditions. But tonight, surrounded by voices that wished me well instead of harm, I was exactly where I belonged. The text that had shattered my world had ultimately shaped it into something far better than I could have imagined, and for that unexpected gift, I was finally, truly grateful. What would you do if your entire family turned against you for money? Have you ever discovered that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally only loved what you could provide? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts on family, betrayal, and finding strength in the most unexpected places. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt alone in dealing with toxic family dynamics, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and triumph. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that chosen family can be more real than blood, and that sometimes the best thing people can do for you is show you exactly who they really are. Thank you for joining me on this journey of heartbreak and healing, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it, but by your courage to claim it anyway. Until next time, keep choosing yourself, keep building your chosen family, and keep believing that the best chapters of your life might just begin with the words, "the end."